All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ice Cream for PR's podcast. My name is Jeff Nippard, and with me, as always, is my co-host Robin.
Hi.
And today we have a very special guest. His name is Bryce Lewis. He's a strength coach with online coaching company, The Strength Athlete. Welcome to the podcast, Bryce.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your coaching company? I've had only positive things to say about the Strength Athlete since I became aware of them. And I think that you guys represent a special minority within the coaching community in that all the things that you guys do is very athlete-oriented and science-based. And I think that you guys are doing a lot of great stuff.
We appreciate that. To kind of orient ourselves to providing more and more for the athletes, specifically powerlifters is primarily who we work with, although we're starting to work with more bodybuilders, figure athletes, fitness athletes as well. But I'll back up a little bit. I am a competitive powerlifter in the 93 kilo weight class generally, although I compete sometimes above that. And as far as my background, I played volleyball in high school and college for San Francisco State, and then I switched to doing bodybuilding competitions. And then that led me into powerlifting. So I had some success in powerlifting, stuck with it. I think I'm up there in the top 3 or 4 or so in the 93 kilo class in the United States, at least, and trying to get to the world level one of these years. And competitively, I've hit a 600 squat, a 430 bench, and a 700 deadlift. And, just looking to make improvements there. In October of 2013, I started the Strength Athlete so I could give back to the sport and pass on some of the knowledge that I've learned and help bring other athletes up to the same level of competition, if not beyond. So since that time, we've worked with over probably 300 athletes now. We've got a handful of athletes at the international and national levels, and trying to do more and more for them on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And something that I really admire about you, Bryce, as a coach is that you not only sort of talk the talk, you also walk the walk yourself. And I know you just competed at the Arnold Classic, right? And put up some pretty impressive numbers there. And that gives your clients something that they can sort of like look up to, I think. And I think that that's really important.
You can tell that your clients have a lot of respect for you, like just watching you lift and stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I like that a lot. One of the things, though, that I'm trying to get away from a little bit, I guess, is making it, the Bryce show and making it more that TSA is a team of now 5 coaches who all are great, when it comes to programming for athletes and have a track record of athletes instead of just like, hey, here's this guy that's strong, sign up because we want it to be, hey, sign up because this is what we can do for athletes, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So just taking a step aside from the training for a minute, as I understand it, you're a philosophy major or you have a degree in philosophy. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So my path in undergrad education wasn't exactly straight. I started off as a math major for 2 years and then switched to philosophy. In the meantime, switching between 3 universities. I started off at San Francisco State, then to community college, and finally finished at UCLA with a degree in philosophy.
That's cool. It's interesting because, as far as I know, a lot of mathematicians tend to have interests in philosophy as well, which that's really cool. And it's interesting that you ended up here as a strength coach from that place. Do you find that your background or education in philosophy is useful in this particular industry? And if you do, how do you think so? How do you find that can help you?
I think so, especially for people that are into exercise science, not necessarily just meathead coaching, that kind of thing. There are a few branches of philosophy, and some of the ones that apply. I think logic definitely applies in realms anything when we're dealing with science, so exercise science for sure, and being able to construct arguments and convey things to our athletes in terms that they can understand, and be able to look at someone's argument for something and figure out, hey, is this something I should be paying attention to, or is this something that doesn't really matter or doesn't hold weight when you actually break it down? So yeah, I think in some senses it does. Obviously, some stuff about metaphysics doesn't really apply to powerlifting too much or athletes, but we've been getting a little bit more into sports psychology lately, and we've been pairing with a great mental performance coach from New Zealand named David Neath, and he's been doing wonders for athletes. So there's a little bit of a carryover there between sports psychology and philosophy, but different in some senses that it's more performance oriented.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things that I've noticed, especially within the nutrition community and also in the exercise science or just training community, is there's this widespread lack of basic understanding of logic or even just basic concepts of knowledge. So there are certain things that you'll see posted online or wherever, and you could know virtually nothing about exercise science or nutrition, and just by the structure of the argument alone, you could say, well, this doesn't really make any logical sense.
Like there's a lot of complex, like they try to complicate things with all of these, I don't know, different variables or whatever, but if you just look at the whole thing as a whole, like their argument just is like, just on many levels is not valid, I guess.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't follow from what you posted. How did you possibly reach that conclusion? And so I find that I have a passing interest in philosophy. I don't have any formal education on the topic, but it's definitely one of my sort of side interests. So I thought it was cool that you also have an interest in that. But what I found has helped me is my ability to think critically and be skeptical about different ideas. So, as you know, there's a whole bunch of misinformation out there, and your ability to sort of question that information and think critically about the different sorts of things that you're hearing from different sources can help you sort of wave through and sort out all this sort of different information that's coming at you.
And find the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I very much agree. Taking a critical eye to things helps in so many areas, even outside of powerlifting and fitness and, these areas that we kind of frequent. It certainly helps in those areas for sure, but it helps outside too, and being able to put on your bullshit detector a little bit and allow into your beliefs information that is probably going to be more accurate than otherwise. And for the listeners, there's a YouTube channel called Qualia Soup that has a series of videos about open-mindedness, skepticism, and just kind of general logical concepts that I think it's all animated and conveyed pretty easily, and I think it's very much worth the reader's time.
Oh, cool.
That's Qualia? As in, like, do you see colors the way I see colors? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So moving back to sort of the athletes and your coaching and all that, one thing that I particularly like about the message that you put out there, Bryce, is your focus on long-term planning. And this is something that I would like to take and sort of apply to my own coaching. And I was wondering if maybe you could elaborate on how it is that you manage to sort of keep your athletes motivated and interested, and keeping in mind this sort of overarching long-term goal. And we can talk about
that, like the short-term goals. Sorry to interject there, but like when people are given 4-week training programs with a specific short-term goal, that. Like, I find that clients like that, like, it motivates them, like, in that time block. But when you're looking at powerlifting, what really matters is, like, is when your competitive season is, and, like, the competition date, and, like, organizing the training within that larger macro cycle is really important. So I guess just asking how you keep your clients motivated when keeping, like, the long-term goal in mind.
Yeah. So I can't speak directly for my clients, and I'm sure they'll listen to this and give their own 2 cents. But generally, people that come to us for coaching come to us because they're interested in competitive powerlifting and competing in some form or another. So either at the local level, the national level, the international level, they have aspirations to grow to one of those levels. So it's important under that context to make sure that we're preparing athletes for the highest level and not necessarily just doing what matters to get them stronger right now. So there's kind of a few important things that go into that that are general to sports as a whole. So athletes that peak under the age of 18 often aren't able to reach or get over that same peak performance later in life. And it's rare that we really have athletes that we're working with under 18, but the general idea is that slower, sustainable progress is going to be better in the long term. Generally, we get to avoid injury a little bit better and get to plan them for where they're going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, even if they're not necessarily going to be working with us still during those timeframes. But, to go back to your point about reconciling, hey, we need to have short-term goals. We also need to have longer-term goals too. I'm sure you're aware, and your listeners are aware, that we can periodize at different time lengths. So we've got microcycles that are a week long, mesocycles that are 4 to 6 weeks, and we can look at the time too. So how we manage it is we just create a plan for the year ahead, and we haven't really looked into multi-year planning just yet, besides kind of having a few ideas about where athlete X is heading in 2 years. But we look at what's going on in the year ahead, which competitions are you planning to compete in, and we program times of decreased volume. This is the time where we're doing a volume block to an intensification. This is the time where we need to periodize nutrition, in terms of having an athlete in a caloric deficit and a caloric surplus. That doesn't mean that we can't set goals on the short term either. So we have athletes that run all kinds of different types of training, but if I have an athlete looking forward to even a mock meet in 8 weeks' time, that still provides a pretty darn good amount of motivation that they're going to want to look forward to it and train hard and prepare themselves for that.
Cool.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's the best way to go about it, because I find what happens sometimes is people sort of miss the forest for the trees. So they become fixated on one goal, like, oh, I need to get my squat up or whatever it is, right? And so they'll run a 4 or 6 week squat phase or whatever, and they'll miss the idea that, well, the goal of powerlifting is to post the best total, right? That isn't to say you can't focus specifically on one thing at one time, but when you have this sort of overarching perspective, this long-term outline, I think that can help people see the big picture, right? And I think that helps in keeping people motivated over the long term. So I really like that about your philosophy. Another thing that I noticed that you do is, or at least this is something new maybe that you've been trying out, is you pose questions to your team or you post them on your social media that are meant to be sort of thought-provoking, deeper type questions that get people thinking and interested. And you said that this came from, or you got the idea from one of your old philosophy professors who would come into class and pose a question to the class that was a little bit deeper and got everyone thinking, and then a discussion would ensue. How has that been going so far?
Really well. So we've had people on the team that have picked it up to varying levels. Some people that have started journaling and kind of rediscovered their journaling that they used to do on a regular basis and really like that we're doing it. And some people that probably consider it for a few minutes and then just go about what they were doing normally. But I had a philosophy professor at the community college that was a young guy, and he would write a question on the board and then discuss it. And these discussions often would range from 15 minutes, and some of the more heated ones would take 45 minutes or so. And, they were on topics related to philosophy, of course, but I've applied it a little bit more to powerlifting. So there's psychology questions, there's questions about programming and basic programming concepts. What is failure? What do missed repetitions mean to you? To what degree should a training program be customized to the individual and why? Stuff about psychology biases that we all hold, just so that people can be, like we mentioned earlier, better critical thinkers.
Yeah, and that's a big one, the cognitive biases that we see in the industry so frequently. One of those that I'll just touch on quickly here is the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's not so much a cognitive bias as it is just a principle or an observed principle in psychology. But in case any of our listeners don't know, the Dunning-Kruger effect is this idea that people who are undereducated or, say, non-experts on any given topic tend to overestimate the amount of knowledge that they actually have. So they're overconfident in what they know. And people who are actually genuine experts on a topic or possess a whole lot of knowledge tend to be underconfident or underreport their self-perceived expertise. And do you find that this manifests itself in the fitness industry much? The people who have, say, the least education and presumably the least amount of knowledge tend to be sometimes the most vocal or the most confident in sort of like the nonsense that they're espousing. And then people who are genuinely profoundly knowledgeable and have a lot of good things to say sometimes shy away from it because they're fearful that they might be wrong or they doubt themselves intellectually or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's pretty pervasive too. And I think that scientists, of which I'm not one, but Sam Harris is one that I look up to quite a lot. Neuroscientist and philosopher also.
Jeff is a big fan.
Oh, really awesome. So
I'm not a fan of his ethics, though. Are you? Like his moral landscape?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you are? Oh, okay. All right. We'll talk about that after.
So I think it was either an interview or one of his books or something said that, a scientist in a room of other scientists knows that someone in that room is going to be an expert at anything they're going to say. So there's definitely a caution in what you're saying, and you have to word things very specifically and realize that you're only talking about one small area of your specific expertise. And that's something that we don't just see in the general public, because it's very easy to make generalizations about topics and just rehearse things that you normally say and not think critically. So it's more difficult to think critically and to keep all these biases in mind than otherwise.
So one guy that I follow pretty closely is Dr. Steven Novella. He's the host of the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Bryce, but it comes highly recommended. But he basically says that after every show that they do, they'll speak on some topic that some guy did his PhD thesis on or whatever, and we'll know absolutely everything about it and just email them and just tear them to shreds, basically, because of all the stuff that they got wrong, right? But I think that should be seen as a positive thing, right? That people are thinking critically about ideas, and I don't think that this should deter people from being vocal about ideas if they think that they are able to speak on them intelligently.
Which is why provoking, like, to come back to what Jeff asked you about, like, you provoking discussion within the TSA community and your followers and stuff is a really good thing, because it can bring to light, like, a lot of different people's opinions. And I think people really, really like being invited to speak out on an issue, whether they're an expert or not. Like, I think it's just really helpful. And then I feel like there's less, like, I think that diminishes, or, like, it makes it so that there's less of that, like, someone claiming to be an expert and, like, forcefully putting out their ideas. I feel like asking people to discuss things kind of turns people away from that, if I am saying that.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I've tried to phrase it in such a way that it doesn't look like there's a clear answer, and that it's just kind of asking people what their thoughts are. And I think that kind of discussion is great, because well, with this specific set of questions, I'm usually bringing up a fact or a concept or something like that, putting a little bit of color into it, and then telling people, hey, what do you think about this? Or can you find an example where this occurs in your life, or something like that? So, yeah, I think that's good. And I think people can generally talk about things that they're not experts about. It would be foolish to only talk about things that you're an expert on. But as long as you don't assert that you know more than you do.
Yeah, for sure. One thing sort of related to this, Conan O'Brien, the host of the Conan show or whatever it is, that late night show.
Yeah.
He's been doing that now for probably 10 or 15 years, right? And you would think that at this point he would be perfectly confident and would just go in and do an episode, record the show, and feel that it went great or whatever. I mean, it's a very successful show, and he's definitely established within that arena. But he says, he doubts himself all the time, and he always thinks that he has no idea what he's doing, basically, and he just goes out there and does what he can do. And he says sometimes he thinks that the episode was crap, and then sometimes he thinks it was good, but overall he just feels like he has no idea what he's doing.
It's like what your dad said, like the imposter effect or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
When you know that you know enough on a topic to speak about it, yet as soon as you get the nerves, it's like you feel like you're an imposter in your body, like you don't really know what you're talking about, and like how could you possibly be talking on this matter? I suffer from that all the time. So like I see these as manifestations of one stream of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right, where you have people who are genuinely knowledgeable but they doubt their ability because they know how much more there is out there that they don't know, and that's sort of what takes most of the weight, I guess.
I think that's good. I think it's a good idea to stay humble and always realize that, hey, there's someone that knows more about subject X. But that shouldn't be discouraging. It should be encouraging. Like, hey, this is the room that I have to grow, and look at how much there is to know and how much there is left to discover still.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that sort of helped me reconcile this in my own mind is something that Canadian rapper Shad said in one of his talks that he gave. He said that intelligence isn't a virtue, so unlike things like courage and kindness and, patience and so on, intelligence isn't in and of itself virtuous. So when he views it through this lens, he's able to focus instead on, not being selfish or not being cowardly, and recognizing that, well, if he's wrong, then that's not the end of the world, because, everyone makes mistakes, everyone gets stuff wrong. And that instead he focuses on not regretting things he did wrong or said wrong or whatever, but instead he regrets things that he did that was, like selfish or cowardly or whatever.
Just to bridge off the idea that it's okay to be wrong. I definitely think it is, as long as people are willing to admit when they're wrong. And I think these days I've come across quite a lot of people that attach their beliefs to attach attacks on beliefs to attacks on character. Yeah. So if someone questions something you believe, they take it to mean, hey, I'm questioning whether you're a good person or not, or things like that, instead of, hey, I just think that you're wrong in this specific situation. So we see that all the time, that, I can question why someone's doing a squat a specific way or programming a specific way, and they may take it to mean, hey, I don't like you as a person, or I feel like you're bad, or something like that.
Yeah, no, I've seen that as well. I think we all have, if we've been around the fitness industry for any significant amount of time.
Sure.
So I'm just going to touch on a couple of these questions that you had here, and we can sort of discuss them on air.
Yeah.
So one of the ones that I really liked that you posed was, what does progress mean to you? And would you be happy if you had the results without the work? So here I'm assuming you're, getting at the idea that there can be different flavors or varieties of progress, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one-dimensional. So a lot of people think of progress in terms of getting stronger in the gym, adding weight to their squat, or getting leaner or losing weight or whatever.
For sure.
But there are so many other ways that we can progress and gauge progress. And so I think it goes, many layers deeper than that just simple progression in strength or weight loss.
Yeah, I think so too. And specifically with this question, this one was from Eric Helms, actually. I'm pretty sure this one's from Eric Helms. The idea is that the end result is not necessarily the whole goal, and that there's so much to be gained through the experience of lifting or dieting or competing on a daily and weekly basis, and that you shouldn't save up all your satisfaction for that one end result. You should experience satisfaction from day to day and week to week. Kind of just embrace the journey.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of people get fixated. So I notice this all the time in bodybuilding. People will think, as soon as the competition is here, then this will all be worth it, right?
Yep.
And then the competition comes, and they're like, "Oh, that was it? Like, that wasn't that great. I only got on stage."
Not to mention that sets up this false idea that, well, once the competition's over, what do I have now? Like, now I have no goals. I have nothing, and leads to all kinds of bad habits and dualistic thinking. Yeah, I'm sure you guys experience that with your own clients and athletes too.
Yeah, for sure. So being able to enjoy whatever it is you can enjoy throughout the course of your preparation is a much better approach than sort of wishing the preparation away so that the event will come and then be over and then you can eat whatever you want again, because it's never as good at the on the other side as you think it's going to be, unless you've embraced a mental state where you're just enjoying the whole process anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on about this question is that, we can progress in ways other than the two ways that I mentioned, right? So even like things like form, like if you improve your form, if you spend 4 weeks and you come out the end of the 4 weeks with better squat mechanics, then that should be seen as very important and significant progress. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be that you got stronger, right?
Yeah.
Do you emphasize these different types of progress with your athletes? Like, do you bring them up, or do you kind of let them, through your questions or whatever, let them find that out on their own? What's your approach?
So some of this takes place in conversations back and forth through emails. But what we have athletes do when they start off with us is come up with up to 4 process-oriented goals, things that aren't necessarily about a specific result that will happen in a specific amount of time, things that they can work on here and now that will help get them to that end result. So that kind of helps avoid some of that tendency of telescopic thinking, and instead focus on what's happening on the specific day. So we do talk about kind of the journey and stuff, and just enjoying and embracing what's going on a daily basis. But through some of those process-oriented goals, we hope that athletes think more about that and think about different types of progress.
From my perspective as a bodybuilder, sometimes it can be really, really hard to see any significant amount of progress, right? That's part of the reason why I like powerlifting in the off season. It's because it gives me something tangible to sort of hold on to, right? But if you're just a strict bodybuilder,
looking at changes in the mirror, you're bound to see things at a snail's pace if you're looking on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be frustrating for bodybuilders, right? Especially if you've been lifting for, 4 or 5 years, you're probably, getting close to your genetic ceiling, or you're at least getting to the point where you're not seeing changes on a month-to-month basis anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so in this situation, I think it becomes even more important to focus on the journey instead of the destination, because if you can't enjoy yourself and see progress in the very little things, like maybe just slowing down a rep a little bit, or a slight posing tweak or something like that, then you'll burn out trying to get the progress too fast, because it's just not going to come fast after a certain amount of time, right? There's always diminishing returns in bodybuilding, especially natural bodybuilding.
Yeah, I very much agree. And that kind of reminds me, that's probably one of the reasons why we see this upswing of bodybuilders doing off seasons in powerlifting, because it adds back some of that satisfaction of gaining progress on a faster timeline.
Yeah. So, are you familiar with the myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus? It's an old ancient Greek myth. This poor guy Sisyphus was punished by the Greek gods to roll a big giant rock up a mountain, right?
Yeah.
And so he had to roll the rock up the mountain and then just push it back down and then roll it back up again, and he had to do this for all of eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that this is such a brutal punishment is that it just negates all meaning, essentially, right? It's just a menial task over and over again.
Yeah.
And this is the way that sometimes I feel in what?
An effort in futility.
Yeah, it's an effort in futility, exactly. And this is the way that I think I sometimes feel, and other bodybuilders probably sometimes feel, is that you're just doing the same thing day in, day out. Even if you have goals, and even if you are slowly getting a little bit stronger, it can feel as though you're just, pushing the rock up the mountain only to have it pushed back down again.
Right.
Especially from on season to off season with a lot of natural bodybuilders, I find.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can seem a little bit pointless. What is all this work for? Why am I working so hard? I think in some of those cases, it's a good idea to put a little bit of perspective into what's going on. Like, hey, natural bodybuilding is important. This is a worthy goal. It's something that you've chosen. But hey, this is a hobby as well, and this represents, I'm hoping, a small part of your life and something that you enjoy, and it's something that you signed up for too. No one's forcing you to do this. This isn't punishment or anything like that. This is voluntary. So make it fun, find ways to make it fun.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's how you resolve the problem of Sisyphus, right? You have to sort of attach your own meaning to the task. So
Sure.
Even he could say, I'm going to try to push the rock up with one hand so far and then try to get, you could set little mini goals for yourself and make it fun, and then that attaches meaning to it. So if you're a bodybuilder who seems to have hit a plateau or the results aren't coming in as fast as you'd like them to, then if you frame it in that perspective where, this is fun, this is your choice, it's what you enjoy doing, presumably, then you can focus on that instead of the, slow rate of progress or whatever.
Yeah.
Bryce.
I do.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I do like the idea of framing it in different ways, and I think that's important, and taking advantage of the fact that you can view things from different circumstances helps a lot. So we have athletes that have blocks over like a specific weight that they hit, and a tool that we've used occasionally is here in the U.S. we use pounds. So we've had athletes just program all of their weights in kilos. So now they have none of those associations that they had with, let's say, a 400-pound squat or something like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh,
I like that.
It's just a total different number to them and something that just has no relevance.
Right.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah, because people, myself, I was like
this.
this. I wanted a 500-pound squat for so long, for like a couple years, right? And Robin was the same way. She's still chasing a 200-pound squat. And like these are kind of arbitrary numbers, right? Like in and of themselves, there's nothing special about those numbers. Sure. It's just something that you decided
nice round number.
Yeah.
It's like completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and another thing I was just going to quickly touch on here on the idea of progress is making mental progress. So I get a lot of people come to me who are just obsessed with one specific thing, right? Like they want to lose weight on the scale. Yeah. And I'll tell them that, well, the number on the scale is important as a guide and as a tool and this sort of thing, but it doesn't tell us the whole story, right? Sure. So you shouldn't become fixated on one thing. And I feel as though I've done a good job of teaching a lot of my clients that, there are other things, like this is why we take waist measurements, this is why we get photos, this is why we track your progress in the gym, because it's not just about that one number. And, if you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror and you say, I look better, I feel like my pants are fitting better, if your goal is weight loss, and then you get on the scale and you're up, say, 0.4 of a pound or something, and it just ruins the rest of your day. Yeah. And I think that you're sort of putting the emphasis on the wrong thing, right? And you're really narrow in your scope there. So I think that people can make mental progress and can sort of put less weight on the scale, so to speak.
Or on the numbers in the gym.
Or on the numbers in the gym if you're a power lifter. Yeah, exactly. And I think that this sort of like broadening of perspective can be seen as progress in and of itself.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things in there. One is that the majority of people that probably are coming to you, and the majority of general population people, when they're viewing success when it comes to, let's say, body weight or something like that, or let's say body composition, because that's a little bit more general, how they look. One of the only pieces of information they have access to is what their body weight is. So they tend to over-obsess about that. When, it's just another tool and another measurement that we can make use of among multiple things. So yeah, the same thing is true for powerlifters. When people get obsessed about a specific load on the bar, when we can take a look at bar speed, RPE, training time, total amount of volume, intensity work per week, and just a bunch of other things.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's move on to another one. Your intern, Joe Stanek, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but anyway, I had the pleasure of meeting Joe briefly at the Arnold Classic. And, he posed the question, if you were to become injured, how would that affect your life? And what if you could never train again? So this one hits pretty close to home to me. I don't know if you've sustained any significant injuries throughout your training career, but just last year I had an injury in my back, and it basically prevented me from low bar squatting for a pretty long period of time. And then I thought I was, good to go again. And that path to recovery is never as linear as you expect it to be or hope it would be. So for me, this is something that I've more recently had to deal with and sort of overcome, and it can definitely be a psychological battle, and it's a difficult one. If you've ever had to deal with this, you can probably relate. But in terms of dealing with this, from my experience personally, I've found that it's a luxury to be able to switch back and forth between powerlifting and bodybuilding as I please. So I sustained that injury just shortly after Canadian Powerlifting Nationals last year in 2014. And then I decided I would just switch gears and start training for bodybuilding. And so then I started my prep for the Muscle Mayhem in California. Didn't do any squatting or deadlifting for lower body work. It was leg press, hip thrusts,
loading.
some leg curls, glute ham raises, this sort of stuff. And I ended up winning my pro card there. So for me, it's nice to be able to switch between those as I need to if I become injured or stagnant in one or the other.
Have you sustained any injuries, Bryce?
Yeah. In college volleyball, I ended up bulging an L5-S1 disc. I could barely walk in the morning, and it was excruciating for a while. And I ended up getting an epidural shot that gave the area room to heal, and just kind of slowly started working my way back into things. And it hasn't prevented me from doing anything since. There's been other injuries, dislocated shoulder, doing something stupid while snowboarding and things, but nothing that's globally prevented me from powerlifting, thankfully. So, we just want our athletes to do as much as possible to make sure that doesn't happen. But it's not to say that accidents don't happen. And, we have athletes that get minor tweaks and injuries and aches and pains all the time. And I think the most frustrating ones are the chronic ones that don't go away and that are just always there in the background, just giving you little reminders of the pain. From my experience coaching these athletes, those end up being the most frustrating because going back to talking about Camus, it just seems pointless, and it just seems like there's no end, and it's just very frustrating.
Yeah.
Both my side as the coach, because I want to do something, I want to help.
I know.
What can we do? Let's find a problem. I'm relatively solution oriented when it comes to things. So when I can't find a solution, or I can't direct someone, hey, go see this person or something, it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I can relate to that both on a personal level, myself and as a coach as well. And I agree. So is there anything specifically that you do other than, seeking professional help or whatever to actually alleviate the injury itself and expedite that healing process?
Or is it just a preventative measure? Like, do you do I noticed that on your pages and stuff, you show a lot of active rest sessions and mobility sessions and stuff, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're not licensed physical therapists, we do a lot of referring to people that are licensed physiotherapists, and we're in the process of working up a questionnaire sheet. Like when someone says, hey, I'm injured or I'm hurt, we'll say, hey, okay, quickly fill this out. Let us know basically how serious it is through a series of questions. And then from there, we either say, okay, well, just train through it or something like that. It's really not a big deal. Or it's just basically severe DOMS. It'll go away in a few days. Or this is something more serious. We need outside help. We try as much as possible to defer to people that can help them and put their hands on them in person, because, when it comes down to it, we're oftentimes thousands of miles away from these athletes. And information, emails, and Skype calls are great, but
you're not there in the gym witnessing their performance and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So we tell people to find physiotherapists that work with athletes, that know kind of modern definitions of pain, that know ART and Graston and other active release methods. And as far as kind of preventing some of that stuff, we try to regulate volume throughout the training year. So it's not just the case that your volume this week should be higher than your volume last week. It's a very short-sighted way, I think, of looking at things. It may be great for progress, but you're going to burn out, you're going to crash, and you're likely to get injured that way. So being able to change volume and put in periods in the training year of lower volume and lower training stress, I think is extremely important to keeping athletes healthy, keeping athletes with reduced stress, and making sure they don't injure themselves.
Mm-hmm. So by periods of lower training volume, do you just mean a simple deload, or do you actually mean a block of training where volume is, significantly lower than a previous block?
So sometimes we'll put in deload weeks, and deload weeks usually are somewhere around 30% less volume. Usually the intensity drops a little bit too. And usually post-meet, we'll put in periods, quote-unquote transition blocks of 2 to 4 weeks of decreased volume and often decreased exercise specificity to both give a mental and a physical break too. So it's not just squat, bench, deadlift.
Yeah, that's kind of what Robbie is doing
now.
I
like that. Yeah. I'm doing a show now, so I'm pretty much I was I need a break from the numbers and from specifically the competition squat and the competition bench and the competition deadlifts, and I've just been doing other things, and it's really nice. So it'd be cool to have that in a structured way, how you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in the context of powerlifting, this is some of the stuff that I've learned from my mentor, Eric Helms, and some of the stuff that we've just kind of figured out on our own. But we do opposite stance deadlifts, we do opposite bar placement on squats, and we get in a lot more decreased specificity on the main movements. So bench press, we'll get in a bunch of variations, we'll throw in some extra bodybuilding work, and we'll say, hey, if there's things that you wanted to put in the training year, but we had this fixed plan and you want to experiment with, now's the time to do it. So if you feel like doing some Olympic weightlifting, let's get some of that in for you. Let's get it all out of your system now. Let's have some fun in the gym. Let's keep the RPEs a little bit lower so that when it comes time to actually get back to training, they're both mentally and physically refreshed and ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach to post-competition. Just back to the injury thing just for a moment. So we talked about sort of the physicality of it. Psychologically, do you have any approaches that you take in terms of helping you deal with the injuries or overcome the injuries?
Yeah, so it's kind of specific on the injury, but much like what you did, you switch focus. So you focus less on the injury and you focus more, instead of focusing on what I can't do, you focus on what you can do. And you find ways to work around it or through it if possible. So, if sumo deadlifting is out of the question, well, let's get you conventional deadlifting. Does it hurt? Okay, well, can you do singles? All right, well, you can't do singles, so, conventionals is out of the question. Can we get you doing RDLs? And just continuing to find ways to keep an athlete in the gym, I think, ultimately is what we're after, as long as that's going to alleviate some of the pain and keep them motivated, too. So finding out what you can do is ultimately one of the best ways of keeping them motivated. And if it's really just you're injured, you have to be out of the gym completely. Since the athletes are still reporting to us on a weekly basis, oftentimes we say, hey, well, we can't focus on that, but let's talk about psychology, or do you want to learn about programming? Let's focus on something so this is useful time for you.
Yeah. And I think that helps from a practical standpoint and also just from a general well-being standpoint. So when you focus on things that are within your locus of control, things that you can actually do at this point in time, you're much more likely to be happy and better off mentally than if you're focusing on the stuff you can't do. So with me, it was a real battle to not focus on low bar squatting because I was making such good progress on the lift when it was happening.
Like a PR at the meet. And
I just finally hit my 500-pound squat goal, and then, the next week later, I hurt my back. So now I can't keep going, and it's just so difficult to not fixate on that specific thing that you want to be doing, but you can't do, right? And so I sort of, got led towards the old Stoic philosophy, where they basically say that you should focus on things that are within your locus of control, not things that are outside your locus of control. And so ultimately, it's only these mental states, right? It's what you focus on that will ultimately make you happy or unhappy or whatever, and not things external to that. And so I found that did help me. I mean, it was still sort of a struggle, right, the whole way through. And anyone who's passionate about this stuff and has been injured can probably relate. But that was sort of a basic mentality that I tried to keep reminding myself of.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a really good way of thinking about it.
Yeah. So another thing here has to do with sustainability. So the question is, do you think that the current way that you approach your training or diet or your competition prep is something that you could sustain over the long term? And I think that this one was Eric Helms as well, who posted this one in the coaches group.
In that case, this is the one from him. The other one was us.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Continue anyways.
Yeah, so could you comment on that, the idea of sustainability over the long term? I can speak from a bodybuilding perspective here in that, I get some people coming to me, maybe their first competition or their second competition, and they'll say, I love the way I look right now. I just want to be able to maintain this and then I'll be happy. And I'm just like, well, you're peaked for a bodybuilding competition, eating whatever it is, 1,400 calories a day, doing cardio 6 days a week. There's no way you're going to be able to sustain this over the long term and be healthy and lead a normal lifestyle in the process, right? So I think that from a bodybuilding perspective, you sort of need to come to terms with this, right? You need to come to terms with the fact that to be a normally functioning human, you're going to have to put on some body fat after your competition, and you're going to have to become comfortable with that new body composition that you're going to acquire. And it's okay that it isn't necessarily sustainable over the long term. I think that it would be wrong to look at it as something that's sustainable over the long term. That's actually a specific look. It's a little bit different than an approach being sustainable over the long term. And I think that there are things that we can do to sort of make the approach more sustainable. So flexible dieting, for example, would be one thing that can help people be more adherent over, a period of months and years, rather than a strict meal plan that they're supposed to follow for these 12 weeks and then the competition's over and they don't know what to do from here. That's been my experience with that sort of idea.
As far as the realm of powerlifting, we can give a pretty concrete example with a well-known template program called Smolov. And for those that don't know what Smolov is, it's a very intensive squat cycle that has a ton of volume. You're squatting very frequently and very heavy, and it's basically the opposite of something that's sustainable, because you get to the end of it if you get to the end of it.
Not when you right here.
Right. But if you do, you're rewarded with relatively large PRs, but it's just something that's not sustainable because it's not something that you can do back to back, or something that is going to ultimately build the best athlete over the long term. So that's a pretty concrete example of the opposite approach. So volume is great. Too much volume will cause progress, but we end up with a circumstance where, in order to progress further after you've done something like that, you're going to need that amount of volume or more in order to make progress, because progressive adaptation requires increasing volume over periods of time. So it's a little bit of a trap, because you'll have to increase volume after that, and that's just not sustainable. So
I read it in the Is He's Powerlifting to Win book. Yeah, where sorry to interrupt, where he was saying that forcing the volume you're getting like diminishing returns or something from it, and like you're not able to progress, like you like get overreached by the volume, but rather if you like spread the increase in volume out over a longer period of time, you'll like your gains will like match that a little bit more. I'm like really like using really bro terms right here, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's about applying the right amount of force to cause change, and not necessarily more than that if you can help it. I mean, like I could open a door by turning the handle, or I can open a door by throwing a sledgehammer through it. One of those is going to be a more sustainable approach.
Yeah, and I know of people who are brand new to powerlifting, and so they use Google as their primary resource or whatever. They land on Smolov after only probably, practicing the lifts for a period of a couple months, and they run Smolov and they sort of jump the gun on all this volume, right? Whereas they would probably maximize their progress over a longer period of time if they would just, increase that volume more slowly,
volume,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for the people that are kind of just trying to figure all this stuff out and figuring out all these terms, there's an idea that Helms and I were both thinking about separately, but came together. I'm sure you're familiar with Eric Helms. He's got a nutritional pyramid series that talks about the importance of different concepts as related to dieting and your success in dieting. So at the bottom is adherence, and then calorie balance, and then macronutrients and micronutrients, and so on and so forth. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've watched the series.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was thinking that it would be really cool to create something like this for concepts related to training. So adherence, overload, training specificity, volume, these kind of concepts, so that people know how to rank things as far as their importance in each other. Like, okay, well, specificity is important, but what's more important, volume or adherence to a program, or consistency, or remaining injury-free, and how do we relate all these things to each other? So I brought this up to Eric, and it turns out he was already working.
Oh.
Look forward to that, I'm sure, soon.
I think you and Jason touched on that in the Power Builder talk that you guys did for the Epic Summit. Or
the strength guys are currently working on a similar model, so it'll be interesting to see how much overlap there is there. But if I recall correctly, I think the bottom layer was consistency and effort. No, it was injury. It was the bottom layer was safety / injury prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And the next layer up was consistency and effort, and then it went to volume, intensity, I think periodization, and then advanced techniques. I believe that was the structure that we used. So a lot of people.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So probably might want to collaborate or cross check our information.
If that could get like as big as the flexible dieting nutrition pyramids, like backwards pyramids that we're seeing, that would be really good. Because I find that like it's now so mainstream to like have kind of that more overarching view of how nutrition should go, whereas like training is now still in the baby step process of people, of like the general population understanding like what is the what they need to take from like periodization or like just training in general. So it would be really cool if that could get popularized and gone viral, like the nutritional.
I very much agree. And I mean, I know we have a pretty self-selected group when it comes to the type of athlete that's going to apply to TSA. Is already someone that cares about science and exercise science, and knows about raw drug-free powerlifting and knows about us. But with those caveats, the majority of people know about flexible dieting and know about macros. It's absolutely amazing, and it just kind of speaks to the prevalence of these ideas that even powerlifters coming to us know about this and kind of have this background knowledge.
Because like there are a lot of very bro powerlifters when it comes to nutrition out there, which I wasn't expecting. Because a lot, I don't want to say, I would say like powerlifters generally know more about training than bodybuilders, but like they definitely just don't, like from my experience, know a lot about nutrition. Like, I mean, online it's starting to, but But yeah, it is really cool to see like powerlifters who are like already doing IFYM and flexible dieting and stuff like that. And
there's just so much dogma surrounding powerlifting in terms of nutrition.
It was cool.
It's funny at
funny
times.
Story, since like our listeners like to hear our random funny stories. But someone suggested to me that before my meet, I was like depleting like on 1,400 calories, like even lower than that some days, and I was trying to get to 103 pounds. So I started at 108 like a week out, and I was like just trying to like get down there. And I was like, he suggested that I only eat a salad with deep fried chicken strips, like so romaine lettuce, deep fried chicken strips, and like full fat barbecue ranch dressing, and like that would get me to my weight class.
So that sounds good.
I was like, wow, like I'd love to eat that right now. Thank you. But you know, I ended up just having plain chicken and lettuce. So yeah. And I did make it to my weight class.
It's funny, and Bryce, I'm not sure if it was you that posted about this, but it really hits home the point of our misconceptions about ideas of causation. So it's like this guy who
he made his
I know,
weight class
I mean, he's a good lifter, and you know he's a friend of mine and whatever. I'm sure he won't mind if he's listening that we're making fun of him.
Sorry,
but the idea is that like you know he probably had this meal right leading into his meet.
He said he only ate that meal.
Yeah, he only ate that meal.
And
he lost weight, and so you attribute the loss in weight to that specific thing that you changed, right? Yeah. So it's like I could have switched from, you know, Excel gum to like Juicy Fruit gum in like my meat prep, and lost 7 pounds and said, this is the key. You just have to switch your brand of gum.
That's definitely the key right there.
Right? And so people don't understand that like just because something is correlated with something else, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a causal link between the two.
I mean, we're dealing with complex systems here, and have you guys heard of the term the whoosh? Sometimes when athletes diet for weeks on end,
McDonald.
Drop 2 or 3 pounds all of a sudden. You know, that word speaks itself to the idea that this is something that's just a complex system that we don't understand at all, and that we're just kind of putting a word in there to speak to our ignorance, basically.
Yeah. And then it's kind of similar with powerlifters or like newbie powerlifters who run like a intense phase or volume heavy phase like Smolov, and then they go into the Wendler's 5-3-1 after that, and then all of a sudden they make like crazy gains, and it's because they just took like a big reduction in volume, and then they were realizing kind of their gains from the previous phase, and then they don't realize that that's what happened, and then they just attribute it to 5-3-1. They're like 5-3-1 got me the biggest gains.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. All right.
That was a really big tangent.
Yeah, I don't know where we were there. I don't know how we got
I don't know.
The Eric Helms question. Eric Helms, there you go. It's just, you know, stimulating discussion.
So we were talking about the idea of sustainability over the long term, and you're saying that, you know, jacking volume up too high, too fast, wanting the results too fast, wanting the weight loss yesterday isn't the best approach to take if you want something to be sustainable and manageable over the long term, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you guys can speak to the idea, too, that weight loss that is lost slower over a longer period of time is more likely to have been kept off, and that's proven by studies as well.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, like, you talked about this, like, very briefly, but I was going to ask you, like, do you, like, suggest, you said you're taking on more bodybuilder type clients, do you suggest that they do powerlifting in the off season, or like how do you go about like that? Like, is it something that you recommend, or is it something that you like wait for them to ask you? Like, how do you go about that?
I wait for them to ask me. So essentially the athlete themselves choose the direction, and as coaches we just try as best as possible to get them there. So again, Helms, because he's my mentor. We are the navigators of the ship, and the clients are the captains. So they decide, and we just try to plot the course to get there. Mm-hmm. So if they decide, hey, I want to do powerlifting in my off season, we're like, all right, great. This is how we would go about it. this is the plan. If they decide, I just want to stick to bodybuilding, okay, well, this is the way we go.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I just from my own experience, I mean, you must have to use some discretion there, because some people come to me with goals or ambitions that are just so blown out of proportion. Like, I had one guy who was like 200 pounds, probably 20% body fat, who wanted to get to 250, 6% body fat over the course of the next year. And, you just have to tell those people that this is just unrealistic. I think we'd be better off focusing on XYZ of a goal. Maybe you should actually try to cut a little bit of weight and you might actually look bigger. Sometimes as coach, I'm sure you've experienced this. You've sort of got to take the
maybe
driver's
someone
seat
wanting to add like 200 pounds on their squat in like the next 8 weeks or something.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that stuff happens all the time. We have an initial Skype call with all athletes that first start with TSA, where we talk about a lot of things, answer questions for them, discuss more of what we're about, and talk about their goals. And in that, we're trying to, among other things, we're trying to figure out, are we right for this person, and is this person right for us? And part of that is, are they asking unrealistic things of us? And, we always try to be as realistic as possible, because it sets them up for better success.
Right.
And, sometimes that's great. We're like, yes, we can do this. Let's go. It's going to be awesome. And sometimes we're like, okay, well, we can do part of that, or this is what's realistic, and this is what could happen, but over a longer period of time. And I don't ever think those answers and those discussions are taken the wrong way. I think it's always taken as we're trying to help this person ultimately get to the best that they can be.
Because it's before they've even signed on, kind of thing.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So one thing, Bryce, that I'd like to quickly touch on is the idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So Jason, the president of the Strength Guys, and I collaborated on an article called Training Like the Pros, Kai Green's, or What We Can Learn from Kai Green, or something like that. And basically, we said that, his whole idea about training is that it all sort of starts with the mind, right? And that you need to focus on being intentional with all of your movements and everything like this. And so we sort of made the case that this is true. There's a lot of truth to that, and that, being sort of directed by your thoughts is a good way to approach training. And this sort of lends credence to the value of intrinsic motivation, so actually being motivated because you find the task fulfilling in and of itself, rather than because of some external factor. So I guess my question is do you think that there's any relationship here between intrinsic motivation and long-term success in powerlifting?
That's a great question. And just playing devil's advocate here, I'm trying to compare in my mind a person that's motivated by extrinsic goals and a person that's motivated by intrinsic goals, and what they both actually do to get the work done. And I'm wondering if you'd end up with different results in either case. So, for instance, in some cases the motivation is important, and in some cases it's secondary to what they're actually doing with their bodies and what they're putting in their bodies. But I don't know.
Yeah. I've read a little bit of literature. I've read a little bit of literature in sports psychology about this, and it does seem to be the case. Actually, I read one study where they, what did they say? They artificially supplied intrinsic motivation to the subjects. I don't know how you would do that, how you would control for that in a study, but they supposedly ran this, parallel arm trial where they had one group that was externally motivated. They probably, I don't know, I mean, they could have gave them like an Instagram account and gave them a bunch of likes or something. And then the intrinsic group, they gave them a bunch of exercises they actually enjoyed. I have no idea what they did. But what they found was that at the end of the study, the intrinsic group consistently and significantly outperformed the extrinsic group. Now, whether this would actually carry over into the real world or not, I can't say
you
for
could
sure.
argue that a combination of both would be maybe ideal. I mean, I find personally that I'm intrinsically motivated, I for sure, but like I definitely gain a lot from being like involved in a community where everyone's kind of doing the same thing and everyone's like supportive of each other and posting about their progress and stuff, and like other people's progress motivates me as well. So
yeah, I think in practice we're not likely to find people that are strictly intrinsic and strictly extrinsic. It's going to be mixed, but if what you're saying is true, then it's an interesting point that having your own motivations and your own reasons for doing things are. I think in practice that's going to be more likely to get you to do the things when no one's watching.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of motivational quotes to say that
what you eat in private, you wear in public.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, is that one? I haven't heard that one. But yeah, exactly. That it's what you do when no one's watching that's the real mark of success. But that speaks to intrinsic motivation for sure.
Yeah. I would, if I was to stand on one side of this question, I would say that being intrinsically motivated or predominantly intrinsically motivated would lead to more longevity. Like you're more likely to stick around for longer if you're genuinely intrinsically motivated by something rather than just seeking out external sources of validation or reward or whatever it may be. That is just a hypothesis, but to me it seems like I stick around to the tasks that I genuinely enjoy and that I like in their own right, and things that I'm doing just because I think I should be doing it or whatever, I tend to veer away from. Like for example, I don't know if you know this about me, but I was 2 years deep into a dentistry program here in Halifax, so I had 2 years worth of a doctor of did you know that?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, I was 2 years deep into that program and decided that it wasn't something I was genuinely passionate about, and I'd rather pursue a different discipline. And so, I mean, I feel like this is kind of the way it goes, right? If you're not actually genuinely passionate or fulfilled by a certain thing, then you're probably not going to be as likely to stay with it over the long term. Or if you do stay like it might feel like it's a little bit forced or something, right?
Yeah. So again, playing devil's advocate here, I'm trying to think like, hey, being a skeptic and stuff, let's figure out ways around this. I'm trying to think of like Russian and Chinese weightlifters that basically are either doing this for money to feed their families, in the case of Chinese in lots of cases, or huge sums of money for them, or in the case of some of the Russian stories that I've heard, they're put in the sport by their parents at a young age. They're not doing it because they love it or because of any deep reasons. They're doing it because they're being told to. And eventually they either learn to love it or they don't, but they can still achieve pretty darn high levels of success too.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess that would come back to the idea of how you're defining their success, right? So if their success is just the total that they post, then, well, yeah, sure, external motivation seems to be doing fine there. But if their success is defined more internally, let's say, right, like in an actual fulfillment or how good they feel about what they're doing, then maybe it's not as good, right?
I totally agree with that.
That's how I would approach that one. Yeah, so that's really all I had to say about that.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So you did a bodybuilding prep with Lean. That's what you were saying, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that you'll ever do bodybuilding again, or have you switched over to powerlifting kind of for good?
Almost exclusively powerlifting. There's a very, very slim chance that I would ever go back to bodybuilding. And it's not that I didn't find enjoyment in it. It's just that I got caught in, I guess, what we were talking about earlier, in that I got to the end of a prep and competed and placed at whatever placing I did, and looked back and thought, was that really worth it? Was the feeling of competing and being up there and doing all this worth to get up to that point? And the answer for me was no. And that's not to say that that's a general answer for everyone. It's just how it struck me. And that I ended up finding a lot more fulfillment in powerlifting.
Cool. I figured that would be the answer, but
like you looked awesome though. Like I saw you Throwback Thursday, a photo of you, and like it would be interesting to see how if you've made a lot of improvements in your physique over the course of the last. I don't know, when did you compete?
I feel like he would be a good person to ask. Have you made a lot of improvements in your physique, in your opinion, Bryce?
2012 or something like that. I think I did my last competition. Actually, no, it had to be way before that. 2010. my last year of college, I think I competed in a competition. One thing I am considering, though, is dropping down to the 183s for a few competitions, which I would look pretty darn lean in if I was to do that.
You'd also be a beast in that weight class. Holy shit.
There's a lot of 183s is a stacked class, and actually this year at IPF Worlds, there's 3 people with nominated totals that are a half a kilo apart in that weight class.
Oh wow, that's
so it's going to be awesome to see.
Yeah, for sure. Are you going to Worlds, Bryce?
No, I'm not. I'll be watching the live feed this time.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, wait, now I just thought of another question because it really pertains to me, and I don't know if I'd have another opportunity to ask it, but how do you feel about losing strength while cutting down to a lighter weight class? And, like, do you have your clients ever do this? And how do you help? Like, I found psychologically it was very, very hard for me to do and to, like, just not be able to perform as I was able to, like, at a heavier weight. Yeah, so that's my question.
That's something that we deal with quite a lot. So first, athletes tend to want to drop down to weight classes, even if they're not going to be competitive in that weight class.
Yes.
That was me, yeah.
They just want to be lean. They want to drop down. They see other people, coming in at the top of their weight classes, and they want to do the same. So we have the conversation about, hey, is dropping down really a good idea right now? And then we talk about that. And ultimately, like we said, we're the navigate. They say, hey, we're dropping down, then, we can give all the advice we want, but ultimately we try to make the plan to get there. And the other thing we try to do is set up realistic expectations of what's going to happen to strength when we drop down. So how long is the drop going to take and what's going to happen to strength? And coming from experience as someone that's dropped from 198 to 181 back with the older USAPL weight classes, I had to deal with this myself, and the way that it was framed for me is kind of the way that I try to frame it for other people, and that's to understand that best case circumstances is preserving all of the strength that you have right now. And if we do better than that and you actually gain strength over this period of time, that's icing on the cake. But realistically, I try to tell athletes we can expect to keep about 95% of your strength, and that's a good thing dropping down a weight class. And we talk about improvements in Wilks score instead of global improvements, or we talk about what multiple of your body weight your deadlift is. So instead of a 1.5 deadlift that may have been 400 pounds, now you're doing 380 pounds, but it's a two times your body weight deadlift or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we talk about relative strength, and that factors into the Wilks score as well. So just like we talked about before, we just reframe progress.
Right. And do you program differently for athletes who are, like, cutting a lot of weight? Because I found with me, like, I was just having terrible recovery. Like, I only trained 4 days a week, but I was barely able to recover from my training sessions.
So it depends on, I guess, how severe of a caloric deficit we have to get an athlete in. But we try as much as possible not to change training. But if we find that an athlete isn't recovering from training, and the RPEs are just way too high, then we'll make some tweaks to make sure that's not happening and that we're getting sufficient volume in still, but stuff that's not just beating them up terribly.
Okay, cool.
Bryce, I have a quick question for you about your programming, and what you just said then reminded me of it.
Yep.
You do percentage-based programs, right?
So we do a mix. It depends on athletes. We run some athletes with fully auto-regulated programs, some athletes with fully percentage-based, and some athletes where, say, the assistant stuff is auto-regulated and the main stuff is percentage-based.
Right.
These days, I prefer doing percentage-based stuff. I kind of feel like I have more control over what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. So you said then if the RPEs are getting a little bit too high, do you get your athletes to report their self-perceived RPEs or whatever to you, or do you give them a target to hit and then have them report that to you, or how does that work?
So if I'm running percentage-based programs, what I've been doing, and it's been pretty successful from a coaching perspective, is have the athlete track last set RPEs. So say they're doing 3 sets of 4 at 75%. Whatever their last set RPE is, I have them put that down. That way I get an idea of how fatigued they are, and I can essentially auto-regulate the program for them. Or it's not auto-regulation because it's not them doing it, but I regulate the program for them by adjusting training loads going forward if needed. So it seems to be a nice balance between the rigidity of going in and having a load that you're supposed to hit and the flexibility of those loads not being so fixed that they never change.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cutting edge.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that's everything, unless you had another question, Robin.
Yeah, I had bonus questions, so I'm happy.
All right, Bryce. Well, you enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming on.
Of course. See you guys later.
See you, Bryce.
Bye.